Venezuela has one legitimate claim against Guyana. I'm sure you've heard about the border conflict between Venezuela and Guyana, this zone in reclamation that Venezuela calls it, Guyana Essequibo. Hi, I'm Ulf Erlingsson, doctor in physical geography, and I've been following the political and geographical events in Venezuela since about 2010, including this conflict here. Now, if you don't know the background, Venezuela and Guyana used to be the same country, the Spanish Empire. There was a 100-year war for independence of Holland, and that ended in 1648 with the end of the 30-year war and the peace treaty. A new order for Europe was created there, but also it was decided that the border between the Dutch holdings in South America and the Spanish holdings in South America would be the Essequibo River. Then further east, it's Portugal, of course, Brazil. Here we have Google Earth, and as you can see, the border here and here, there are red borders now. Just a couple of weeks ago, it wasn't like that. That's because the case have gotten up on the international agenda now. Everybody used to draw the border here between Venezuela and Guyana, except Venezuela that drew the border here. And this is the striped area of reclamation. Now, what do I mean when I say that Venezuela has a legitimate claim? Well, I'm not talking about the land area, because the land area has to be settled in a negotiation, arbitration, whatever it takes. But I'm talking about the sea area, because offshore from any country there are territorial waters. First it's the area where they have full jurisdiction, and then there is the area, the economical zone. And here Guyana has claimed an economical zone that goes up along this line. And they have made oil exploration blocks because they found that there is petroleum in this continental shelf. So they have given permission to drill for oil to Shell and Exxon, and they have found oil, lots of oil, good oil. So Guyana is now an oil country. Used to be very poor, now it's an oil country. Which means that this has taken on a new significance. However, the thing here that I say that Venezuela has a legitimate claim is because the border that Guyana has drawn in the Atlantic Ocean goes very much towards Venezuela, towards the uncontested territory of Venezuela. Venezuela has drawn its line here, and Venezuela says that all of this is our uncontested, and they have given oil concessions to American companies in an area that, according to Venezuela, belongs to Venezuela. Now, maybe you wonder, why hasn't this conflict been settled before? We are in 2023. And this happened, the border was drawn in 1648. Well, England conquered this from Holland. And then England extended the territory this way in the 19th century with an arbitrary new border that they drew up that Venezuela never acknowledged. But then there was an arbitration in 1899, which gave us the result that Guyana, or Great Britain in that case, should get this. And they even gave Great Britain more than they asked for. At that time, Venezuela had just been in a civil war and was in a very weak state, whereas Great Britain was a great power. So Venezuela was the weaker one in those negotiations. However, when Guyana was given independence in 1966, then Venezuela revisited this and said, we don't recognize 1899 arbitration, it was fraudulent. So the United Nations set up a new process, and Venezuela has said since 1966 that the 1899 is thrown out the window by the 1966 agreement, and Guyana does not agree. So that's where we are now. And it's in the International Court of Justice where Guyana has sent the case, but Venezuela says we don't recognize that court. So that's where we are now. For a long time, well, maybe you wonder what happened between 1966 and 2023. Well, for decades, Guyana was a a dictatorship, a socialist dictatorship, client state to Cuba and obviously Soviet Union. Whereas in 1999, Venezuela came under the boot of Cuba and Russia. And now Guyana is a democracy. And these oil concessions are to American companies, so the shoe is on the other foot now. When Chavez was president in Venezuela as practically a stooge for Cuba, then he started to be too independent. The Cubans didn't like it, and everything indicates that the Cubans poisoned him in order to kill him, saying that he was sick, and he actually died in 2012, although they say 2013. And they installed Nicolas Maduro, who was a more docile and manageable president. He had been the foreign minister under Chavez. So when Maduro was foreign minister in Venezuela, he also allowed Guyana to do this. Because they were acting on orders from Havana, Cuba. Now, Venezuela still sends oil to Cuba, even though Venezuela is in such a difficult economical situation that 1/4 of the population has fled the country. They still send oil to Cuba. And they import bad gasoline from Iran to sell to the population at home. The oil they found here, by the way, is much better quality than the one in Venezuela. So, back to the topic. What is the legitimate claim that I think Venezuela has? Well, this line of Guyana is not very right, because a border between economical zones should follow the middle line. That's the basic principle. The middle line between the territories, not counting uninhabited islands. And here we can see Trinidad up here, South American mainland down here. This is the middle line that I have traced, calculated. This is the line between uncontested Venezuelan territory and Guyana Essequibo that Guyana has traced, the one we see here, the black and white line here. And this is the line that Venezuela has traced. I took it upon myself to measure the distances here, and my result is that this is more or less the middle line. So it's in between the Venezuelan and the Guyanese line, which means that this triangle here, at least this triangle here, is a legitimate claim that Venezuela has on Guyana. And that triangle includes oil blocks that they have given concessions to, I think it was for Exxon to drill there. And that did actually cause a flare-up a few years ago when Venezuelans sent Navy ships there to stop the oil exploration. So then it's not like Venezuela have done nothing, but they've been very complicit for decades. And the reason is the connection to Cuba. Connection between Guyana and Cuba and Venezuela and Cuba. Now in Venezuela there is a strong popular movement for demanding free and fair presidential elections in 2024. The opposition held their primaries. They elected Maria Corina Machado with a large amount of votes. And in the general elections in 2024, everything indicates that the opposition will win big with a landslide. However, it's important that Venezuelans in exile get a chance to vote too. It's their right to vote. The fact that they had to flee the country in order to get food shouldn't deprive them of their right to vote in the presidential election, because once Venezuela returns to democracy, most of these Venezuelans who have fled the country will go back. The Venezuelan diaspora today is one of the largest in the world, and it's caused a lot of conflicts and problems all over Latin America, even North America, United States. Even here in Europe, we have a lot of Venezuelans refugees. And they're unfortunately being sent back to a cruel dictatorship that tortures. They sent an airplane from Iceland. All were detained, their possessions were taken, they were accused of treason for having applied for asylum abroad. And still Europe keeps sending Venezuelans back. It's unconscionable I was taken hostage in Colombia earlier this year, and I was taken to Venezuela. I was interrogated by a person who apparently, obviously works for the Venezuelan dictatorship, and he told me, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua are in the revolution, as they call it, La Revolución. And ELN supports that, and ELN is an armed group with, like, as they told me, 15,000 to 20,000 soldiers, well trained, accustomed to guerrilla warfare. And they are defending this regime. It will not be easy to return to democracy, because this is not just a guerrilla, it's a narco-guerrilla. It's a criminal organization. Venezuela is a criminal regime, international organized crime. So to restore that to democracy is not easy, but it has to be done. And this conflict is better to put on hold until after the return to democracy in Venezuela, so that both countries can negotiate in good faith. Because the way things are now, this is being used as an excuse in Venezuela for not returning to democracy, and that's not the idea. So Venezuela has a legitimate claim, but it's better to hold it on ice and wait for now. Thank you for your attention. And please follow my channel. You may want to sign up, and you may want to go and look at the videos of what happened when I was visiting the border region between Venezuela and Colombia, the Catatumbo, which is considered to be the hottest area in Latin America now when it comes to drug trafficking and crime.